All right, ready to dive deep. Today we're tackling something we all deal with, those sneaky life traps that can trip us up on the path to, well, just about everything.
Yeah, it's like no matter who you are or what you're aiming for, these patterns pop up again and again, almost like they're built-in human glitches.
Exactly, and we're using this great article, 15 Traps to Avoid in Life, as our guide today.
Hmm.
I gotta say, this thing is packed with those bite-sized bits of wisdom that really get you thinking.
Yeah.
I was nodding along the whole time I was reading it. Have you ever fallen for any of these traps?
Oh, absolutely. It's so easy to fall into those patterns without even realizing it's happening, which is why recognizing them is so important.
I think everyone listening will relate to this first one, the cheap dopamine trap. You know that feeling? Endlessly scrolling through social media or refreshing your inbox. It's like we're hooked on these tiny little hits of instant gratification.
It really is insidious because it taps right into our brain's reward system. Every notification, it all triggers a little dopamine rush that keeps us coming back for more.
So it's not just that we lack willpower. There's actual brain chemistry involved.
Exactly, but understanding the neuroscience can help us break free. Research shows that if we delay gratification and go for activities that give us a sense of accomplishment, that can actually lead to a more sustained release of dopamine.
Okay, so instead of mindlessly scrolling, we should focus on things that give us a genuine sense of achievement.
Exactly. Think about setting goals that really matter to you and celebrating those wins, even the small ones. Your brain will be much happier in the long run.
It's like we're tricking our brains into working for us instead of against us.
In a way, yes. It's about understanding how our minds work and then using that knowledge to our advantage.
And speaking of getting caught up in chasing external validation, that leads us right into the pride trap, that little voice inside all of us that wants to look successful all the time.
And that trap can be really dangerous because it keeps us from admitting when we're wrong or asking for help when we need it.
It's like we're so focused on keeping up a perfect image that we miss out on actually learning and growing.
Exactly. We get so fixated on appearances that we miss out on the real substance.
That ties in perfectly with the being in a hurry trap.
Mm.
If we're always trying to appear successful, we can get sucked into that whirlwind of busyness, rushing from one thing to the next without stopping to think about what's actually important.
It's like we're on autopilot, just racing towards a destination without ever questioning if it's even where we want to go.
So sometimes slowing down and being more intentional with our choices can actually lead to greater productivity in the end.
Precisely. It's not about doing more, it's about doing the right things.
Okay, switching gears a bit. Have you ever felt stuck in a loop of what-ifs when you have to make a big decision?
Oh, the prolonged indecisiveness trap. Yeah, that one can be paralyzing.
Too many options, overthinking every possible outcome, it can totally lead to inaction.
Absolutely. The key is to have a clear vision for what you want your life to look like. When you know what really matters to you, making those decisions gets easier because you have those guiding principles to fall back on.
Makes sense. But what about when we're so impatient for results that we fall for the quick fix trap? We all want that magic formula or shortcut, don't we?
It's tempting to think we can achieve success overnight, but in reality, lasting change takes consistent effort and dedication. Rome wasn't built in a day, right?
So true. Got to embrace the journey.
Absolutely. It's about enjoying the process of learning and growing, not just fixating on the end result.
This next trap is one I know a lot of people will relate to, the lifestyle inflation trap. It's so easy to increase our spending as our income grows.
It is. We often feel this pressure to keep up with appearances, so suddenly we need a bigger house or a fancier car.
It's like that never-ending cycle of wanting more, 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 but does it actually make us happier?
That's a big question, isn't it? A lot of times chasing those material things leaves us feeling empty. Defining your values and making sure your spending reflects those priorities is a much better approach.
So maybe living below our means and prioritizing experiences over things is the key to greater happiness and financial freedom.
It might sound counterintuitive, but often that's the case.
I love this next trap, the start of life trap, that idea that once we achieve a certain thing, then our life will really begin.
This one keeps us stuck in a waiting game. We convince ourselves happiness is just around the corner, contingent on some external achievement. But the truth is, life is happening right now.
It's easy to put off our dreams, thinking there's always a better time to start, But then we miss out on the journey.
Exactly. It's about finding ways to appreciate the present moment while still working towards those goals.
I think a lot of people need to hear that. I know I do.
We all need that reminder sometimes.
This reminds me of the sunk cost trap, staying in jobs or relationships just because we've already invested so much, even when it's not working anymore.
That's classic, letting the past dictate the present. We get so attached to what we've already put in, even if it's causing us pain.
So how do we break free from that cycle of holding on?
It's about shifting our perspective. Instead of viewing past investments as losses, we can reframe them as valuable lessons.
And sometimes letting go of what's not serving us opens up space for something amazing.
Exactly. Sometimes that's the bravest thing we can do.
We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive, and there's still so much more to explore. We'll be back soon to unpack even more of these sneaky life traps and discuss strategies for navigating them. Welcome back to the deep dive. We're picking up right where we left off, exploring those sneaky life traps, but this time we're getting tactical.
Yeah, in the last part, we talked about recognizing those patterns, and now we're going to equip you with some strategies for actually dealing with them.
So where do we even begin? How do we break free from these things?
Well, self-awareness is always the first step. It's like taking a step back and really observing your own thoughts, behaviors, reactions, almost like you're a detective in your own mind.
I like that, becoming a detective of your own mind. It's about shining a light on those blind spots, those things that are driving our actions that we're not even aware of.
Exactly. And once we've identified those traps, then we can start to figure out how to overcome them.
So let's take that first trap we talked about, the cheap dopamine trap. How do we break free from that addictive cycle of wanting instant gratification?
That's a tough one. It really is, because technology is designed to keep us hooked. One thing that can help is setting clear boundaries around your tech use. Maybe you designate certain times for checking social media or email so you're not constantly bombarded with those dopamine triggers.
Yeah, almost like creating a digital detox schedule for yourself. But then the question is, what do you do with all that newfound time? What are some healthier alternatives to fill those gaps?
Think about activities that actually give you a sense of accomplishment or joy. Things like reading a book, spending time outdoors, picking up a creative hobby, or connecting with people face to face.
Those all sound so much more fulfilling than staring at a screen all day.
They really are, and it's important to remember that when we're not taking care of our basic needs, like getting enough sleep, eating well, and moving our bodies, our willpower and decision-making go right out the window.
So self-care isn't just a luxury, it's actually a crucial part of avoiding these pitfalls.
Exactly. It's like putting on your own oxygen mask first before helping others, you know? You can't pour from an empty cup.
That's such a good analogy.
Now let's talk about the pride trap. How do we cultivate humility and that willingness to learn, even when it feels like our ego is taking a hit?
For me, I think it starts with acknowledging that I don't have all the answers. It's about being open to different perspectives, seeking out people I can learn from, and this is the hard part, being willing to ask for help when I need it.
And remembering that mistakes are a part of learning. It's not about being perfect. It's about using those experiences to grow.
I love that. It takes the pressure off, that's for sure.
It really does. It's about progress, not perfection.
Which brings us to the being in a hurry trap. How do we slow down and figure out what really matters when the world feels like it's moving at a million miles an hour?
One thing that can help is to make a list of your core values, the things that are most important to you. Then you can use those values as a filter for your decisions, how you spend your time, your energy.
So it's about making sure that our actions are actually lining up with the things that we say are important to us.
Exactly. And, it also helps to schedule time for things that nourish your soul, whether that's quality time with loved ones, creative pursuits, or even just some quiet time for reflection.
This all sounds so simple in theory, but I know from experience that it can be really tough to break free from that constant sense of urgency, that feeling like you always have to be doing something.
It's definitely a practice, and some days are easier than others.
Speaking of feeling stuck, what advice would you give to someone who's struggling with the prolonged indecisiveness trap? I know I've been there, and it is so frustrating.
One approach is to break down those big decisions into smaller, more manageable steps. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by the whole thing, just focus on taking one small action at a time.
I like that it makes it feel a lot less daunting. For me, setting a deadline, even just for myself, can help.
Deadlines are a great tool. It's important to do your research and weigh the pros and cons, but don't get stuck in overthinking it. At some point, you just have to trust your gut and go for it.
And even if it doesn't turn out perfectly, It's still a learning experience.
Absolutely. It's all about adapting and being open to adjusting course along the way.
So true. Okay, let's talk about the quick fix trap now. How do we cultivate patience and embrace the journey, especially when it feels like everyone is looking for instant results?
It really starts with setting realistic expectations. Understanding that real change takes time can help you stay motivated when those inevitable challenges pop up.
It's about playing the long game, right?
Exactly. And finding joy in the process. If you're only focused on the end goal, you miss out on all the good stuff that happens along the way.
And celebrating those small wins, those can be so motivating.
Absolutely. Those little wins add up over time.
Okay, let's shift to the lifestyle inflation trap, which I know is a big one for a lot of people.
As our income grows, it's so easy to just level up our lifestyle, Bigger house, nicer car, more stuff, but is it really making us happier?
That's the question, isn't it?
It's really about defining what matters to you. Are those material possessions bringing you joy, or are there other things you could be spending your money on that would be more meaningful?
It's about being intentional with our spending, not just going along with what everyone else is doing.
Exactly. And remember, financial freedom isn't about how much you earn, it's about how much you keep. Creating a budget, tracking your spending, setting financial goals can help you feel more in control.
So it's about taking charge of your money instead of letting it control you.
Exactly. Now let's talk about the start of life trap, that tendency to think that happiness is always just around the corner, dependent on some external thing.
Oh, I relate to this one so much. It's that when-then game. When I graduate, then I'll be happy. When I get that promotion, then I'll feel successful. It's a never-ending cycle.
It is, and one way to break free from that is to practice gratitude. Focusing on what you already have in your life, big or small, can shift your perspective from scarcity to abundance, and that makes you more appreciative of the present moment.
So instead of focusing on what's missing, we should focus on what we already have.
Exactly, and sometimes just taking one small step toward your goals can be enough to get you out of that feeling of being stuck.
Right, action creates motivation. That's what I found.
It's so true, and it's important to remember that time is precious. If you keep putting things off, you might never get to them.
That's a great point.
Speaking of taking action, let's talk about the sunk cost trap. How do we know when to walk away from something, even when we've put a lot of time and energy into it?
That's a really tough one, especially when you've poured your heart and soul into something.
It can be so hard to let go, but one helpful question to ask yourself is this: is this situation bringing me more joy than pain? If it's consistently draining your energy and happiness, it might be time to reevaluate.
That's a great question to ask. Sometimes it's also helpful to get an outside perspective from a friend, a therapist, someone who can be objective.
That's excellent advice. It can be really hard to see things clearly when you're emotionally invested. Now, let's move on to the victimhood trap, that tendency to blame external circumstances for our problems.
Yeah, I think we all do this sometimes. It's natural to feel frustrated when things don't go our way. But how do we shift from feeling powerless to feeling empowered?
It's about recognizing that while you can't control everything that happens to you, you can control your response. Choose to focus on solutions, on what you can do, rather than dwelling on the problem.
It's about focusing on what we can control, right?
Right, exactly. Every challenge is an opportunity for growth. Instead of asking, why me, ask, what can I learn from this?
That's a great mindset shift.
And that ties into the plenty of time trap. It's easy to fall into procrastination, thinking we have all the time in the world, but then years go by and we haven't made any progress.
Yeah, we think we have forever, but that's not true.
One way to overcome that is to set deadlines, even if it's just for yourself. It can help you stay focused and on track.
I'm a big believer in deadlines. They work.
They do. It's also helpful to break down those big goals into smaller steps. It makes the whole thing feel less overwhelming.
Right, just focus on the next step. That's what I always tell myself.
And remembering that time is finite. Ask yourself, if not now, when? That can be a powerful motivator.
I love that question.
Now let's move on to a trap that can be a real relationship killer: the savior and expectations trap.
This one can be tough. It's that urge to try to fix everyone around us, even when it's at the expense of our own well-being.
It's so easy to fall into that rescuer role, but then we end up feeling resentful and burned out.
It's like we take on everyone else's problems as our own, and that's not healthy or sustainable.
One key to avoiding this trap is recognizing that everyone is on their own journey. We can't force anyone to change or grow on our timeline.
And sometimes, the most loving thing we can do is to take care of ourselves and let others figure things out on their own.
Absolutely. Setting boundaries and saying no is a form of self-care. It's not selfish, it's essential.
That's such an important point. Now let's switch gears and talk about a trap that's deeply ingrained in our society, the education trap.
This one makes us think that a formal education is the only way to be successful. And while education is valuable, it's not the only path to a fulfilling life.
Right, there are so many different ways to define success.
Exactly. And there are more resources available now than ever before. You can take online courses, read books, listen to podcasts, attend workshops. The possibilities are endless.
Learning doesn't have to be limited to a traditional classroom setting.
It really doesn't. It's about being curious and seeking out knowledge in whatever way works for you.
Now let's talk about a trap that can have a serious impact on our finances.
Yeah.
The buy now, pay later trap. Those offers are everywhere and they can be so tempting.
They make it seem so easy, but those payments can add up quickly, and before you know it, you're stuck in a cycle of debt.
It's like they're designed to lure us in with that instant gratification.
They are. It's important to become aware of your spending triggers, those things that make you impulsively reach for your credit card. Once you know what they are, you can start to create strategies for avoiding them.
So it's about being more mindful of our spending habits, taking that pause before we buy something.
Exactly. And delayed gratification is your friend. Give yourself a cooling off period. You might realize you don't even want that thing after all.
That's great advice.
And a budget can be a lifesaver. Track your spending, set financial goals. It makes a huge difference.
Okay, onto the scarcity trap. That feeling that there's not enough to go around, whether it's money, opportunity, or love.
We live in a culture of comparison, which can make it hard to feel like we have enough.
It's easy to get caught up in that mindset, thinking everyone else has more than us.
It's a recipe for unhappiness. The key is to shift your perspective and focus on what you do have, on your own unique talents and gifts.
So it's about recognizing our own worth and what we bring to the table.
Exactly. And remember, collaboration is often more powerful than competition. Instead of seeing others as rivals, see them as potential partners or allies.
That's a powerful shift. Celebrating other people's successes can also be a great way to cultivate that abundance mindset.
It really can. When we genuinely celebrate the wins of others, it creates a more positive and supportive environment for everyone.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk about the winning by contrast trap. This is one that's especially prevalent in today's social media world.
It's that tendency to compare ourselves to others, and it often leaves us feeling inadequate because we're constantly comparing our behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel.
Social media definitely makes it worse. We're bombarded with images of perfection.
It's a recipe for feeling bad about ourselves because there will always be someone who seems to have it better.
So how do we escape that comparison trap?
The key is to define your own version of success. What truly matters to you? What are your goals and values? When you have that clarity, you're less likely to get caught up in what everyone else is doing.
It's about focusing on our own path, our own journey.
Exactly. Celebrate your own progress and remember that everyone is running their own race.
That's a great reminder. Okay, let's wrap up with our bonus trap, the it's never too late trap.
This one is tricky because, on the one hand, it's wonderful to believe that you can pursue your dreams at any age, and you can, but it's also important to be realistic about your current situation.
Right, it's about balancing those dreams with a healthy dose of reality.
Exactly. Be honest with yourself about your priorities and limitations. What are the most important things to you right now? What are your resources and capabilities?
It's about making choices that feel aligned with who you are and where you are in life.
Absolutely. And remember, it's okay to adjust your goals as your circumstances change. Life is all about finding that balance between pursuing your dreams and honoring your present reality.
That's a great way to put it. We've covered a lot of ground in this second part of our deep dive. So many practical strategies for navigating these traps. Welcome back to the deep dive. It feels like we've been through a whole obstacle course of life traps in these last two parts.
We have, haven't we? But remember, just knowing about these traps isn't enough. We need to actually shift our mindsets because those underlying beliefs we have, they have a huge impact on how we experience the world.
It's like all those thoughts we have running in the background, they can really shape our approach to everything. But are those beliefs set in stone, or is there a way to change those patterns?
Well, the good news is that our brains are incredibly adaptable. It's kind of fascinating, actually, how our brains can be both our biggest asset and our biggest obstacle. The way we see the world, the stories we tell ourselves, even what we expect from the future, it all boils down to those beliefs.
It's like wearing mental glasses that filter everything we see, but we don't even realize we're wearing them.
Exactly. And those filters, they're often shaped by our past experiences, things we picked up growing up, influences we might not even be aware of. But the good news is, we're not our thoughts, and we can choose which thoughts we pay attention to.
Okay, so awareness is the first step, seeing those patterns and those limiting beliefs. But then what? How do we actually start to challenge them and change them?
Well, questioning those beliefs is a great place to start. Ask yourself, is this really true? Is this belief actually helping me? Or is it just a story I've been telling myself for so long that it feels true?
I like that, questioning those stories we tell ourselves. I find it's helpful to think about where those beliefs came from. Did I experience something that made me believe this, or is it something I learned from my family, from society?
That's a really important point. We often carry these beliefs that we've absorbed unconsciously, but once we see them, we can decide if they actually fit who we are or if we need to let them go.
It's amazing to think we have the power to choose the beliefs that shape our reality. But how do we actually change those ingrained thought patterns? They feel so stubborn sometimes, like weeds in a garden.
One thing you can try is affirmations. These are positive statements that you repeat to yourself, either out loud or silently, to kind of reprogram your subconscious mind.
I know affirmations get a bad rap sometimes, but I've actually found them to be pretty helpful. It's like planting seeds in your mind. The more you focus on those positive thoughts, the more they grow and crowd out the negative ones.
That's a perfect analogy. And visualization can be powerful too. Just imagine yourself achieving your goals, feeling confident and successful. That can actually create new pathways in your brain that make those outcomes more likely.
It's like creating a mental roadmap for success.
Exactly. And remember, repetition is key. The more you practice these techniques, the stronger those new pathways become.
It's like working out a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Exactly. And, it's also important to be patient with yourself. Changing those deep-seated beliefs, it takes time and effort.
It's a journey, not a quick fix.
Right.
There are going to be ups and downs, but the key is to keep practicing and celebrate those small victories along the way.
Absolutely. Even just noticing those negative thoughts without letting them take over, that's a win in itself.
It is, and we don't have to do this alone, right?
Yeah.
Having support from friends, family, maybe a therapist or a coach, that can make a huge difference.
It definitely does. It's like having a team of cheerleaders on the sidelines, encouraging you to keep going.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some of the key things you hope listeners will take away from this conversation?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that we have the power to choose our thoughts, and our thoughts really do shape our reality. We are not just victims of our circumstances. We can create the life we want. It just takes effort and a willingness to look at those beliefs that might be holding us back.
Beautifully said. And we need to be patient with ourselves. Changing those ingrained beliefs takes time. It's a process. Celebrate the small wins, be kind to yourself, and don't be afraid to reach out for support when you need it.
Absolutely. You don't have to do this alone.
This has been such an insightful conversation. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure, and remember, you have the power within you to break free from any trap and create a life you truly love.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep growing, and keep those deep dives going.